What's up everyone, Adam from Cape Crawlers, and today we're doing a build overview of the Axial SCX24 C10. Welcome back to the channel everybody. Today we're going to do another build overview. We're actually going to take another look at the SCX24 C10 build that I have. Now I did a build video on this about 5 or 6 months ago, and if you haven't seen that, I'll link it in the description down below. But a lot's changed since then, and I get asked a lot about this build, so I thought it'd be a good time to do a refresh, kind of go over what's changed, how this thing is set up now, what I've done to it. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, if you haven't seen one of my build videos before, how I do this is I break it down into 3 parts. We kick it off with the appearance, the exterior, and the aesthetic. Next, we take a look at the chassis and the suspension, and then we look at the drivetrain. Along the way, I'll give you my thoughts on the upgrades, why I chose them, how they impacted performance, and I'll also sprinkle in a whole bunch of run footage throughout so you can see this thing in action. But let's dive into this thing. We'll kick this off with the appearance. Starting with the appearance of this rig. So I adore the C10 and how it looks, especially in the green. I think this light green is such a great color. And what really inspired me to go with the white accents on this is that Axial puts the white decals on it from the factory, and I just really loved that white against the green. So I decided to expand that look. So what I've done is I've added this RC 4-wheel drive blazer top here. Now this comes in white from the package, but I opted to paint it myself and give it more of a glossy look, kind of a bright white. I ran it unpainted for a long time, and it just started to yellow and get dirty and was getting difficult to clean. So just recently I gave this a nice fresh coat of white glossy paint, and it looks really good, I think. I also smoked the windows all around, so it's got tinted windows in the blazer top and in the cab area here. And what I used was just spray-on lens tint. I used the spray-on lens tint in the front, and then I used smoke transparent black paint on the windows in the blazer top, which came out much better if you can tell. To complement the white blazer top, I opted to go with the white stamped steel wheels. Now these are the RC 4-wheel drive stamped steel wheels. Endura also makes a set of these in white as well, which I actually prefer the Enduras because they're easier to work with. They accept aftermarket hexes much easier. I wrapped these wheels in the Power Hobby Mud Boss tires. I really like these tires. They're big, soft, and grippy. Big fat tire. Not as tall as some of the tallest tires on the market, like the Swamp Kings or the Endura 64 millimeters. I think they're just the right height for the C10. They seem to just fit the character of the build that I was going with really well. They do still rub a little bit on the front here. I did have to remove the front bumper to make clearance for these big things, and I still get a little bit of catching on the edge of that bumper. I have trimmed the fenders significantly to make room for these tires and other big tires, but I'm still getting that rub in the front. So I may have to trim those further, but it really doesn't seem to catch too awful bad. I'd certainly rub at full steer, but doesn't seem to impact performance or tire longevity at this point. Inside the tires, I have Crawler Innovations soft Lil Nova microfoams, and I've also vented the tires. As you can see, these things are very soft and squishy. They grip extremely well. This thing has crazy traction out on the rocks. In the back, I just did the Endura aluminum rear bumper here. I did have the matching aluminum front bumper, but again, like I said, I took that off to make room for the big tires. And I think that's pretty much it from an appearance standpoint. You know, the white from the wheels and the top against the green really just sets this thing off, I feel. One thing I didn't mention before is that I did flip the wheels to give that deep dish look and also give this thing some impressive track width. So let's move on. We'll take a look at the chassis and suspension of this thing. Taking a look at our chassis here. So this is running the Grizzly Works Low Center of Gravity LCG chassis kit. This is a 3D printed kit that replaces your ESC tray and your battery tray, shifts things around so that you can run your battery up front here. Also drops the battery down at an angle, lets it carry that weight a little lower. Also allows me to run this big 900 milliamp battery in here, which helps put weight in the front, and I want this to sit as low as I can because this is a big piece of battery here. This kit also gives you a multitude of shock placements, but as you can see, I am not using any of them because I'm frame mounting my suspension, which is my preferred way to go if I'm looking for a lot of articulation and flex out of a rig. I do this setup here, which is exactly what I've done on the C10. So I've got hot racing 48 millimeter telescopic shocks on here. These are the longer versions of the hot racing telescopes. This is a true 48 millimeter. They do offer the 43 millimeter too, but this is the slightly longer versions that I have on here. I run them upside down with no springs because I want the body to sit as low as possible, because I've mounted the shocks really low on the chassis so that I can get a lot of axle drop there. But when it's sitting, I don't want springs in here to lift the chassis up, because the further down you mount your shocks, the further up it's going to lift your chassis. So I counteract that by taking out the springs to give this thing the low ride height that I want, but still capitalize on all that articulation and all the range that these shocks provide with the mounting position that they're in. I'm running a custom limiting strap option here, so I like to do limiting straps with rubber bands. I loop them up around the body posts and then down around the upper linkage mount in the front behind the servo. And that just lets me control the drop of the front end. So when I'm going up inclines, they don't unload too terribly, and I can control that. One of the things I like about the rubber bands is that I can control that just by looping this around one or more times, tightening up that strap. So if I'm in an area where I've got a lot of uphills, a lot of verticals, I can quickly adjust this on the fly so I can control my front end. If I'm on a flat area where I'm just crawling and I really want to get that full range and I'm not worried about flipping over, I can loosen them up if I want. But because it's mounted in the center, you maintain horizontal articulation. You just control your vertical axle drop. So this is a good setup. This is my preferred setup. I run this on pretty much all of my rigs with the long shocks. Steering components on here. So I've got an Emax servo here with the Endura aluminum horn. I've got an Endura brass steering link. I have Endura brass steering knuckles. I'm also running these hex extensions here. These are a plus 7 millimeter, I believe, and they're also very heavy. I think they're about 17 grams a piece. So a good amount of brass and width here. This is an example of one that's out of the build. I run these in the front only. In the back, I run just extended hexes. So I'd like to bias the weight towards the front as much as I can. And these add a good bit of weight and width. So I can't remember the name of the brand offhand. I will put the links in the description down below for all the parts that are on this thing. But these were just kind of an off-brand on Amazon. I think they're about $17 for the set of 4. And they work really, really well. So I'm really happy with these. I'm running the Endura heavy brass diff cover up front. And I'm running the lighter version of the Endura diff cover in the back. Again, trying to just shift all that weight forward as much as I can. All this translates into pretty solid performance. I have to admit that after I put the big tires on and the Blazer top, I did sacrifice quite a bit of performance. Before I did these kind of cosmetic things, this was one of my best performers. Absolutely one of my best. But since then, it's kind of taken a couple steps backwards. And we can look at this on my new table here. So first off, I'm going to show you the articulation of this thing. It can do all of the ramp here and then some. So if I really wanted to force it, I could. But as you can see, we are well into the crazy crawler territory, as if we didn't know that already. So it's got lots of articulation here. I am not running flex blades on the back of this like I do with a lot of my other rigs, because I felt like the stance was really good as it was. So I really like the chassis setup on here. Tons of articulation. Let's see how this thing does from a side hill perspective. Turn this towards you guys. My first time using this tabletop, so you got to bear with me here. So all right, so let's check out the side hill. So side hilling and vertical climbing is one of the areas that I got hurt on when I started doing my aesthetic mods here. So that's 40 degrees, 45, it's 50, starting to slide right at 50. About 52 degrees on the side hill. Let's try the vertical. There's 40, 45, 50. We're starting to unload a little bit. 55. 58 is where we lose it. So still not bad for a tall, top-heavy rig here. So it's maintained quite a bit of functionality. And you'll see from the run footage that I've been putting in here that it still performs really, really well. But it did just take a few steps backwards. It was exceptionally good performing. But it's a trade-off. I really love the aesthetic. So I'm happy with how it performs versus how it looks. So next, let's take a look at the drivetrain. Taking a look at the drivetrain here, I'm going to wrap in drivetrain and electronics. So let's take a look what we got. From an electronics standpoint, you will probably notice that this is running the V2 electronics. The C10 usually comes with the V1, which is the all-black ESC here, but I actually swapped it out with my Gladiator electronics when I went brushless in that rig, and I put the V2 electronics on the C10. There's a couple reasons for that. Primarily, it was because I needed the V1 electronics for the Gladiator. So I robbed them off of this and swapped in the V2. But the V2 is smoother, I feel. The ESC overall is better, and you've got better slow crawl, better control. It's just generally smoother, I feel. So I like the V2 setup. So even when I was done with the V1 setup in the Gladiator, I opted to keep the V2 here because I really like that setup. For the motor, I'm still running a brushed motor on this. I'm running the Little Guy Racing Parts Reaper 66 turn brushed motor. I like this motor a lot. It's a really smooth, torquey motor. Doesn't have the same punch and abrupt power delivery as the 50 turns do, and it still has plenty more power than the 88 turns do. So it's just a really good middle ground. This motor is different from the previous video, and I'm really happy with it. Underneath here, if we look at the linkage, I'll group in the linkage here with the drivetrain because I didn't go over it in the chassis. But we're running the Endura high clearance links underneath. These are the stainless steel links. It is a 4-link conversion up front. I'm a big proponent of the 4-link. I think it just really helps with articulation and freeing up that front end to do what it can. Transmission and everything is all stock, so I'm running stock transmission, stock composite gears and everything. I have not messed with the transmission in here at all. It's got the stainless steel skid plate on it. Inside the diffs, I'm running stock gears in the back. I am running the 23% overdrive gears in the front because I really am a big proponent of the overdrive gears in the front. Get those tires to spin faster so that you get slightly tighter turning radius and slightly improved uphill climbing ability. I just feel like it works really well. Good bang for the buck. Whenever I'm in there doing diff covers, I will swap in those overdrive gears. That's been kind of my go-to mod lately when I'm in there. Drive shafts, again, are all stock, so I'm still running the stock length, stock plastic drive shafts. I've had no issues with them. They work really well with the powertrain that I've got going on here. So from a drivetrain perspective, I haven't done a lot to it. It's really just your really, really basic upgrades in this thing. Primarily just the brushed motor, and it works. It's got plenty of power. This thing isn't extremely heavy, so that 66 turn motor does really well in this, and I'm really happy with the powertrain. Alright my friends, that's going to do it for the C10 recap. This was the 2023 build overview of the C10. If you're interested in the first video, like I said, I will link it in the description down below. You can see the transformation, kind of where we were at before, the backstory, how I got the C10, it's a fun story. And then you can see the transformation from where we are today. So it's gone through a lot of changes, mostly aesthetic, but it does look completely different. So it's fun to take a look at where it was versus where it is now. I'll also link all the parts in the description down below if you want to check them out, including all of the parts from the first episode. I'll group everything all together, so this will be a comprehensive build sheet where we are today. If you have any questions about the C10, hit me up in the comments. Always happy to chat with you guys. Also, let me know if there's any other build that you'd like me to refresh next. Happy to start cycling through those and getting back into the builds because they evolve continuously. So these things are always changing, and it's definitely time to go through them again. If you're interested, let me know in the comments down below what you'd like to see next. But glad we kicked it off with the C10. Like I said, this is one of my favorite builds, and I don't feature it enough, and I should because I just love it. It's so much fun. It's great to look at. It's fun to drive. It's super capable, and definitely one of my favorites. So glad we kicked it off with this one. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so, and I'll see you in the next video.